Andy Kishitz,
Here.
Ryan Holmes,
Here.
Gerard Ahern,
Here.
Brad Reed,
Here.
and Gabriella Mano.
Here.
All right, perfect. So we have a quorum for the board, and so we'll open the continuation of the 580 Main LIP project. This is a continuation from the January 18, 2022 hearing date. By way of a quick update, since that last hearing, we had two letters come in from our peer review consultants, one being the Horsley Witten Group initial stormwater wetland technical peer review letter. That was dated, I believe, February 4th, 2022, signed by Janet Carter Bernardo, and a second letter from Vanessa and Associates, Inc. They're the company that's doing the traffic peer review, and that letter was written to Horsley Witten Group. They're the company that engaged with Horsley Witten on our behalf to engineering, and that letter was signed by Jeffrey Dirk, and that came in on February 9th. So tonight we'll have presentations by the Horsley Witten Group and
Having trouble hearing Gerard.
Yeah, Gerard, you broke up.
We'll have take up the whole time. Oh, okay, move this closer. So I was saying we have two letters, one from Horsley Witten Group dated 2/4/22, and the second from Vanessa and Associates of Traffic Peer Review.
Yeah, Gerard, you broke up again, but looks like he's frozen.
I believe
Not sure
Janet
if
has
the-
a hard stop by 7, so let's have her. Can you hear?
We can now hear you. Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. So we'll
Yeah,
have
Gerard, you broke up for the last minute though. No one heard anything you were saying.
Oh, okay. So I was just introducing the two letters that we had issued to the board. One from Horsley Witten Group and the other one from Vanessa and Associates. And we have representatives from both companies here online to speak to their letters tonight. And then we'll have the applicant respond to them. And then we'll also have time for the board and the meeting participants to ask questions. So why don't we have Janet kick it off, because I think she has to leave earlier than the full meeting time, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you very much. For the record, my name is Janet Carter Bernardo. I'm a professional engineer with the Horsley Witten Group. We have provided you a letter regarding the wetlands and stormwater management, as well as wastewater and water. As was noted by the chair, our letter was dated February 4th, 2022. And Amy Ball is with me tonight to talk about the wetlands piece. And Jeff Dirk is here to talk about the traffic piece. So I'll let Amy start, since it's the beginning of our letter is the wetlands. So maybe if anybody has that in front of them, it will be easier to follow if she starts, and then I'll talk about stormwater, and then Jeff can talk about traffic. If that works for you.
Sounds
Good
good.
evening.
Hi,
Amy Ball, I'm a senior ecologist with the Horsley Witten Group.
Our scope in part involved doing a site visit to review conditions, especially the wetland areas. I will caveat our comments by saying that with the snow cover on the ground at the time of our writing the letter, we have not yet done that. We do think that that may be important for a greater comprehension of what the resource areas are on the site. But we focused most of our comments on the paperwork that came in from the applicant and their ZBA application. So we have 4 different resource areas that are noted in the application. Those are bordering vegetative wetlands, isolated vegetative wetlands, meaning they're not bordering anything, bordering land subject to flooding, which is the flood zone, the 100-year flood zone, as well as riverfront area. And these resource areas are all, at least all of the bordering wetlands are all associated with Great Brook, which is to the, I believe, the east of the site. We found that there were a couple of slight discrepancies specifically to the 2 wetland areas on the interior of the site. They were noted as the B series and the C series. The ZBA application, the main body of it, notes that one is a BVW, meaning it would be state jurisdictional, and the other is isolated. But the wetland scientist report that was prepared by the applicant's wetland consultant had identified both of these as potentially being BVW, noting in part that there were some culverts within the interior of the wetlands. So that's one of the things that we felt was rather important for the town, if not the Conservation Commission, but also the ZBA to understand the jurisdictional status of the these 2 wetlands that are interior, specifically the B and the C series. They are, based upon our sort of rough measurements using Adobe, we found that one is the B series is about 3,200 square feet in size, and the C series is about 4,100 square feet in size. Noting that we first would recommend that the applicant clarify the jurisdictional status of these areas, and very specifically because the proposal is to fill both of them. So we're looking at about 7,300 square feet of wetland alteration. The ZBA application also notes that these are both non-jurisdictional, and we're not sure that they have sufficient information provided in their application to support that claim that they are not jurisdictional. Noting also that the local bylaw will protect groundwater, surface water, flooded wetland areas that are greater than 1,000 square feet each, so long as they hold an average depth of 6 inches. The applicant has noted that they will be filing an AMAD with the Conservation Commission. It may be that the town may want to see that information. Am I not speaking very loudly? I'm sorry.
So I think someone wanted to know if there a way to show these.
Oh,
areas.
show the maps.
Yeah, it might be easier for the applicant to pull up the map, and then Amy can talk to it. Is that a true statement? We can pull it up if desired, but
I just want to pull it up on a like an aerial photograph, if that makes sense.
there's an overlay, there's an overall layout plan too, but the isolated wetlands or the small wetlands in the middle are not really called out on
They're
this
not
plan.
as easy to say. That's true.
This is Phil Cordero from Allen and Major. Give me just a moment. Let me pull up those plans, and as soon as I have them ready, I'll share the screen so Amy can speak to them. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks.
I can continue to go through our comments briefly, and then we can talk about them again. A lot of this pertains to the jurisdictional status of these areas. Our second comment, of course, because of the fill of the alteration of these 2 isolated wetlands, the applicant will be filing a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission for work within the B series and C series wetlands, as well as within riverfront area and within the flood zone. They have acknowledged that there will be alterations to these resources. There has not been much in the way of detail as to how that may be mitigated, other than a comment that compensatory flood storage will be provided for the flood zone alterations. Here we go. What is it here? Yeah, there we go. So the C series actually extends onto the next page, and I think the B series is shown on that page as well. Okay, so this is in the grand scheme of picture. There are two existing square-shaped buildings that overlap in sort of a chain link configuration, at least from an aerial view. The C series is directly to the west, correct? The north is straight up, is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just want to make sure that's right. And the B series is just to the south or southwest of that westernmost building. There you go. So we know
Is that
that-
along the parking lot?
That's actually right just south of the building.
Is that before the park? Oh, it's just south, okay. Mhm.
Of the westernmost building.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So we know that the applicant will be filing a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. And again, we have a recommendation for some clarifications of the jurisdictional status of these areas. Their applicant also proposes some alteration within the 25-foot buffer zone in 3 different locations. One is associated with the infiltration system number 1, which is up in the northeast area. One is an infiltration system south of the existing parking lot. And then the third area of the alteration within this 25-foot buffer, which is a local Conservation Commission jurisdictional area associated with the proposal for the compensatory flood storage.
Sorry to keep switching screens on
No,
everybody.
that's okay. Actually, this is a
Bring up
really
the
good screen to
overview.
look at, the overview screen.
So I will highlight what Amy just referenced, just to circle back on it. Apologies for the delay.
Okay, and I'll keep talking, then we can just go back to this a little bit. The third thing that we have commented upon is the additional permitting considerations specific to the alteration of greater than 5,000 square feet of freshwater wetlands, which will necessarily entail some permitting at the state level for a water quality certification, and potentially may also trigger a MEPA filing. We were recommending at this time that the applicant simply acknowledge this during the notice of intent filing, but also provide the town with the copies of both the permit applications for these other agencies, as well as the Conservation Commission and the permits that they receive. They may also need some Army Corps review because of the extent of the alterations, but the jurisdictional status will determine that. We bring all of this up because the applicant has requested a waiver for the local bylaw. And with the alteration of 2 potentially jurisdictional resource areas under the bylaw, without a plan for mitigation at this point, as well as, alterations within their 25-foot buffer that actually do come within just a couple of feet, like 2 to 3 feet from the actual wetland boundary where there is a potential for additional wetland alteration. We feel that the ZBA may wish to retain some of that, the local bylaw provisions, in order to protect the interests that are local to the resource areas in the town. So I kind of ran over that rather quickly while we were looking at this map. But could the applicant potentially show where these two isolated wetlands are in the center of the property?
So those two locations that I've highlighted, the northernmost one is area C, and you can
Mhm.
see area B there. Area C would be located under our main parking, our main drive aisle, portions of building 1 and 2, and then the courtyard of building 2 would be where building isolated wetland area B is located on this plan. Is that sufficient for you, Amy, to continue?
It is that I actually have concluded our comments,
Okay.
other than to circle back and state that part of our scope was to do a site visit. We have not yet done one based upon, the existing snow cover. And that may be feasible in the next few weeks if it continues to stay as warm as it is. But
Mr. Chairman, if I might just step in here for a second. Joe Pesnola, the zoning board's MHP consultant. There may be a process issue here in that a portion of, it appears that a portion of wetland C is actually over their proposed lot line. And the board doesn't have any jurisdiction to grant relief on allowing the filling of that wetland on the parcel that's going to be retained by the current owner, and with regard to the modification of the commercial office building. And just putting out whether the applicant can speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know if you wanted to hear from us as the applicant now, or would you prefer us to wait until after all of your consultants have spoken? I think I can address Amy's comment and Mr. Pesnola's comment also, whatever you'd prefer.
But why don't we, so we have like Amy dealing with the wetlands, and then Janet going to deal with other aspects. Why don't we address these items if they're easily and be more relevant in people's mindset at the moment?
Sure. So very, very quickly and succinctly, the areas B and C that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, one interruption, just identify who's speaking, because I can't see it. With the maps up, I can't see who's speaking.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, we're the applicant civil engineer on the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very succinctly, the areas B and C that are noted on the plan that Ms. Ball and Mr. Pesnola raised, we have not yet filed our ANRAD with the Conservation Commission. We recognize that we have to do that. The reason for our delay with that is the current landowner has been coordinating with the commission on closing out some open orders of conditions. And as part of those, they've been evaluating what the actual wetland resource areas are on site for ongoing maintenance purposes. And that roadmap is our guidance for the updated ANRAD that's going to be coming in. So we have reason to believe by this application that areas B and C can be designated as actually stormwater management areas, and they would actually fall outside of the Wetlands Protection Act regulations. We are working on substantiating that with the commission, and then we would further substantiate that through our ANRAD with the condition. And then it would result in that those areas, when they are filled out of necessity for the project, the property line discrepancy that Mr. Pesnola pointed out, and then certainly the regulations and permitting needed to fill wetland areas or alteration of wetland areas, both locally at the state level and through Army Corps permits, would also fall by the wayside for these two particular areas. So we're prepared to speak to that as we go through the permitting, and obviously we will provide additional information now that it's been raised in the manner that it has.
Okay. So that would be in the form of a formal letter at some point, or some communication to the board, so we don't miss it in like a hearing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will provide, as a response to Horsley Witten's peer review letter, we will provide a response to every item raised in there. So it becomes the documentation for the board's consideration. And in there, we'll make our intentions clear regarding the wetland resource areas, so your consultants can speak upon it. Obviously, we understand that the wetland resource areas are affirmed by the Conservation Commission. So everybody on this call will ultimately defer to them, but we're also prepared to go through that process. But yes, we will document it.
Okay, perfect. That satisfy you, Joe?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to expand upon what Mr. Cordero said, if a stormwater basin, if you will, was constructed after 1996 with the approval of the local jurisdictional bodies, being the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, it cannot, under the state wetlands regulations, be deemed a jurisdictional wetland. So I think that's what they're trying to get around, is whether those features were built as stormwater features, and that they were built, again, after the threshold date of 1996, which is a date that's in the current Massachusetts wetland regulations.
I can confirm that. That is true. So being mindful of the dates is something that the applicant will need to demonstrate to the board's satisfaction. And then other than that, there is just the note about providing mitigation.
For raising those concerns for us to keep our eyes open for.
And the potential for the proposed alterations
Providing
with proximity to the wetlands with the extensive grading.
Okay.
So just to jump in while that topic is hot also, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I did have occasion to speak with Ms. Bernardo yesterday regarding the peer review letter, just so we can all reach an understanding in terms of the necessity of the grading that we're showing and the stormwater locations that we are showing on the plan. Ms. Ball highlighted two areas in her presentation and in her letter, one of which is on the screen here that you can see, which is adjacent to our subsurface infiltration system 2. Which the necessity to build up the existing grade to make sure we have separation of groundwater results in the slope that you see on the easterly portion of the site, which results in the proximity grading relative to the delineated wetland resource areas, again, to be affirmed by the Conservation Commission. So we're going to take a hard and close look at that, recognizing the concerns, and see if there's a better solution to that in the interest of protecting that wetland area in the 25-foot buffer. The alternate area that was raised similarly is on the southerly portion of our site. And this one gets a little dicier in terms of the exact vernacular of the wetland resource area. For the same reasons that I outlined with the isolated pockets of B and C, the rear fire pond was also created as part of a stormwater management system. So there's ambiguity as to whether there's the same protective radius around it in terms of the no-build buffer line that we are encroaching upon. So as we work through that condition with the commission, we will work with your consultant in terms of identifying the performance standards that we need to meet relative to the designation that the commission applies here. And that work, again, on the back side of the site, we identified potential vegetation through this line, this red line, which would ultimately result in a buffer zone approximately here. Excuse the crudity of my drawing, but obviously the grading, the darkened line that exists between those two red lines are the encroachment within the potential 25-foot no-touch buffer zone. And we'll again take a closer look at that and really rely on a lot of the documentation that we have to prepare and work through with the commission.
Should we continue with our stormwater presentation? Or do you have more wetlands questions?
Sure.
Again, for the record, my name is Janet Bernardo, and from Horsey Witten, we looked at the stormwater of this project site. Alan Major really did a nice job on their stormwater design. Basically, the system has a number of proposed catch basins, proprietary separators, pipes conveying stormwater, discharging to two relatively large subsurface infiltration systems. As we just talked about, one on the right-hand side and one on the south side of the property. The one that was just marked in red, that's number 2. That one is located in an area that's currently grass, as discussed by the applicant and Phil, the applicant. We would really prefer to see that one pulled outside of the 25-foot buffer and respect that buffer zone for Great Brook. The subsurface infiltration system 1 is in an existing parking lot. The grading that is proposed to the south between the system and the wetland or the detention basin or the fire pond or whatever it is designated as is relatively steep, and it's really coming off of the parking lot. So, right up to the edge of the wetland. We would believe, and we would recommend that they pull that further away to avoid any erosion in the wetlands. The water quality for the design is fairly substantial, so I don't suspect that there's going to be a problem with sediments or pollutants, metals getting into that wetland system, but the discharge point could cause erosion, and if the riprap outfalls are actually inside the buffers, the wetland line, that's considered a fill that the applicant will need to acknowledge and mitigate for. So some of our other, that's basically our biggest concern, is trying to pull that those two systems a little further away, and so that they can respect that 25-foot no disturb zone. We, the applicant also has a area for compensatory flood storage, but we didn't find the calculations for that in the package. So maybe they were there, but it was obvious that they were proposing something in this area, which is an existing parking lot, that they're pulling back the grades to provide compensatory storage. This kind of large, if you pull out a little bit, you can tell it's a large circle. That is to, that is the well, the new well. Is that correct, Phil? This is the new well that is being put in, so that it's a radius that they are proposing to protect for that well, and having zero impervious area inside that radius, which is why they're removing the pavement, and they've added the pavement to the north of that, which in an area that is now grass, which we struggled with because it just didn't seem reasonable to take away asphalt and then put it in an area that's grass. But the applicant, I think, will address that in some way, whether this system has to be, the well has to be in this exact location, and this makes the most sense. But so some of our other comments that we are concerned with, there was some minor discrepancies with numbers. We believe that the applicant will be able to address those relatively easily with the amount of recharge required and provided, the size of the ripraps of the outfall. There's a in the HydroCAD model, there was a watershed that seemed to really should be divided into two. It's something that the applicant should be able to respond to relatively easily. And but these systems, we didn't see the test pits. They were understand that there's test pits that were within these two systems, but we couldn't read that information. It was hard to read them on the plans. We think we found them, but the test logs and understanding exactly where those were and the information that goes along with them. It's like they're there somewhere. So we're looking for that test pit information to review that, to understand where the separation to groundwater is, and to make sure that there's adequate separation from the bottom of the system to the groundwater. If there's less than 4 feet, it needs to have a minimum of 2 feet. And if it's less than 4 feet, they'll need to do a mounding analysis. So we would expect that to come along if there is a need for it, if there's actually a less than 4 foot separation to groundwater. There's also, we made some comments regarding the erosion and sedimentation control plan, which I believe they'll be able to address. They did provide one. They provided most everything we were looking for, typically look for, but we had a couple of minor comments regarding that, as well as the operation and maintenance plan. That should be relatively easy for them to address. There is an existing drain pipe that goes underneath the leach field, which is unusual. So we are kind of brought that up as something to pay attention to. The Board of Health may be interested in this drain pipe. Usually you don't have a drain pipe underneath the septic system leaching field. So somebody will be interested in the Board of Health would be interested in understanding that and whether that's acceptable practice. As far as the 2 wells and the water supply, the wells will need to be permitted through Mass DEP, as well as the wastewater treatment system will have to go through the Mass DEP guidelines for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of a small treatment facility. So those systems, the applicant has requested a waiver from the local regulations, but they will need to go through the state regulations anyway. So we do not have any real objection to granting of those waivers, though your Board of Health may. So that's, of course, we defer to them. But our biggest concern is the separation from the impervious area and the limit of work to the within that 25-foot no disturb zone from the wetlands line. Any questions on that? Did you follow all of that?
If the Phil Cordero or the applicant want to speak to that, some of your inquiries about documentation and calcs and whatnot, that'd be great. And if anyone from the board has any questions, I want to thank you again for doing a thorough letter review for us. So this is helpful for the project dialogue and report.
Mr. Chairman, speaking from Allen and Major and for the applicant, we certainly also echo what you just said regarding Horsley Witten's review. It was quite thorough and detailed. We are quite confident that a lot of the administrative detailing that has been asked for, clarifications, detailing, we can accommodate that. A lot of bookkeeping issues that we will deal with. Riprap sizing, mounding analyses, those will all be responded to since the issues were raised. We'll absolutely address that. Obviously, their biggest concern was what we touched upon under the wetland umbrella is the proximity to the wetlands. So I expect we'll have a couple more conversations about that and again, confident that we can reach a good solution for both of those areas. I think the only one thing that I would want to raise for the board that Ms. Bernardo brought up was really centered around the well, which our new well is here. And she had pointedly asked the question, does it need to be there? And the answer is yes. In previous applications with this board, or excuse me, previous hearings with this board, and certainly with the select board, we really outlined that the locations of drinking water supply here were critical to the development of this site. And these locations as presented on the plan, this one that's highlighted and actually two additional ones here, are what provide adequate water supply for both this development and the remnant of the Bolton Office Park. So they are absolutely critically necessary. And in order to meet the radii demands imposed upon us for drinking water supply from DEP, and make sure that Zone 1 radius is entirely located on site and controlled by the applicant, these are the locations where we can accomplish that. So because of that, the impervious area that's here, and again, I think this board will recall our longstanding discussion regarding the access road down to the lacrosse fields and the gardens regarding vehicular access. It creates the exact same conversation when we're talking about leaving that existing pavement in place. We simply can't do it. We can't reutilize it. We can't introduce it to vehicular access and parking for the reasons that we've already talked about regarding pollutants. And we also can't use any areas within the Zone 1 to a drinking water supply for stormwater management zones, which is what created the pockets as close to the native design points as possible, but maintaining them outside of the Zone 1. So that's really the basis of the design. We're confident that the next time you see us, we will have made quite significant progress with Horsley Witten. We'll give you a nice response package with revised plans, calculations, and narrative to reinforce everything. And I think we can get where we need to be regarding the application. And happy to field any questions, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as we continue through the hearing tonight.
I believe you've been very, very clear and consistent in your placement of the wells since the beginning of this process. That I didn't realize that there would be any question about where those would be placed.
Any follow in it, or are you comfortable at least for now? We'll wait for their responses.
Is that directed to me or to the board?
That was directed to you, Janet. Yeah, because
Oh, sorry.
he's responding sort of to your inquiry about.
Yeah,
in general.
I wanted to make sure, we were not part of the conversation about the location of the wells previously. So it was something that I wanted to just confirm. But of course, if, it has been a discussion ongoing and everybody is satisfied that that's where the well belongs, and that's where the well belongs. But they will, we are still requesting that they try to pull the system outside the 25-foot buffer. We were more asking the question, why swap the two places? But there's a clear reason why they swapped the two places.
Okay, perfect.
Any questions regarding stormwater, or do you want to switch to traffic?
Either the board or if anyone from that's in the audience, if they have any questions. Otherwise, let's go to the traffic.
One thing, Gerard, this is Andy. There was mention of a drainage pipe underneath the leaching field on the 117 side of the property. Is that something that is proposed, or is that something that's already there?
It's through the chair to answer that question. It is something that is already there. Our schematic design for the leaching field did not pick up on that conflict. Rest assured, we cannot keep the pipe there and meet the DEP standards. So when you see the plans next, that pipe will be relocated outside of the leach field, avoiding that conflict. That was an oversight on our part.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so why don't we switch to traffic at the moment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa and Associates, and As you heard in the introductory, we were retained by Horsley and Witten as the transportation consultant for the board. So just by way of a kind of a high level overview of what we had undertaken as a part of our review, and I think the chair noted you did receive our comment letter yesterday, so it's just fairly new to the packet that you have. So I will provide a summary of our comments similar to what the other presenters had. So our role really is in reviewing the transportation aspects of the project, and it's not just the study that was prepared, the traffic study for the development. It's also looking at the site plans, similar to what Janet was doing, only our focus more is on circulation within the site, the parking layout, and looking at pedestrian and bicycle accommodations as well. So it's all aspects as they relate to transportation. So starting with the traffic study or the transportation assessment that was prepared for the project. The study was conducted in September of last year. So we took a thorough review of that. And the first thing that we do is ensure that the study was prepared in accordance with industry standards as well as those of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Mass DOT sets guidelines and standards that we as traffic engineers in the Commonwealth follow when we conduct this type of study. And it's really to ensure that as this board or other town boards review projects within the town, those studies should be consistent in terms of the way they're presented. And that way you can look at cumulative impacts of developments. And so that's the first step that we undertake. This study was prepared, or the study was prepared in accordance with those standards. It was prepared in a professional manner, stamped by a professional engineer licensed in the Commonwealth who has experience in conducting these studies. So I think that's kind of the first baseline level. Is so what we've done is certify that the facts and figures and the way the data has been presented to you does meet those standards. So as we dig a little bit deeper into the study, one of the first things we looked at is the study area that the study evaluates in terms of looking at the impacts of that project. And there is guidance that's provided to establishing the study area, because that's often a question that we're asked is, you know, what are the limits of the study and is it appropriate to look at the impacts of the project? So as we took a look at that, the applicant study looked at the 2 ramp intersections with 117 and the 495 ramp. So both of those signalized intersections. Obviously the access into the project site, which is the Bolton Office Park driveway. And that was essentially the 3 intersections that were looked at. Our first comment was really that we had suggested the applicant expand that study area to the next intersection to the north, which is, and I'll probably butcher the name, which is Wattaquatic Hill Road. I apologize if I mispronounced that. As the board's probably aware, and the applicant in fact pointed this out in that traffic study, that intersection really controls the flow of traffic in this entire corridor. There's been a number of times that I've traveled through the town, going either to town areas or to adjacent communities, and that intersection has always been one that backs up. And it's primarily, as the board knows, as a result of the left turn movements to head south on that road to Clinton and other areas. And that backs up along the corridor and gets pretty close to where the driveway is at this location. And again, the applicant pointed this out in the traffic study. So it's not something that they weren't acknowledging and acknowledging the way that that interacts with the driveway. So that was pointed out. We discussed with the applicant's traffic engineer. We know that there's been recent improvements, but really the question is, you know, are there other means and methods that could be used to improve operating conditions at the intersection? There may not physically be things that can be done, but we've asked the applicant to study the impact of this project at that location. The project will add somewhere around 20 vehicle trips to that intersection over the course of the hour. So it's one additional vehicle, you know, every 2 to 3 minutes really is what they're talking about. So we don't expect it's going to have a significant impact on those conditions, but it doesn't mean the intersection is operating perfectly today. So what we just want to understand is how will the project impact that location? If there's 15 vehicles in queue, does that go to 20 or something like that? So just to give some dynamics in terms of how the intersection will operate before and after the project. So we've suggested that they undertake an analysis of that location.
So
Again,
that traffic, on that point though, prior to there, you have the school entrance for Florence Sawyer. So which with buses and backups there, that also complicates. So any additional flow at that area or more extensive than one would think. You know, you say a few cars, but it could be dramatic when at the confluence of a couple events.
Right, and that's another reason why we've suggested that your typical study area, you start with one intersection on either side of your driveway, and then you go out from there to see what the impacts are, because clearly traffic turns left or right and it arrives back turning left or right. So picking one major intersection on either side, and then if you would go beyond that, if there are other major intersections that are approximate. So they've done a good job to the east, but to the west, we're missing kind of some data points. And so to the point, we've asked them to provide additional data points to the west so that we can look and see what the dynamics and the operations of the roadway would be before and after the project's traffic there. And it's really getting to, looking at what the impacts may be, and to some extent, to the extent that the applicant may be able to offer some solutions to improve upon existing conditions. That's what the study is looking at.
Because also at that area, you may familiar, our town fire and police rescue services feed in off of Water Aquatic. So any additional backup there on both ends, where sometimes is like just a full traffic jam, them trying to respond somewhere, it could cause some problems.
Yeah, so this will help with that dialogue and to try to identify some potential solutions for the board and for the applicant to consider as a part of the project.
Thank you.
Data collection for the project, and I bring this up because of the COVID. Obviously, we're all very familiar with the impacts it's had on our lives, but as traffic engineers, we also know, and I think us driving around, we know it's had an impact on traffic volumes and trip patterns quite dramatically. So any studies that are conducted during the pandemic are required to look at how the pandemic has affected the data that's been collected, to make sure that as we're assessing impacts of the project, that we're using conditions that we'd like to say would not have been here had COVID not happened. So pre-COVID volumes is what we're trying to establish. So the applicant did, their traffic counts were conducted in June of last year while schools were in session. So that's a good starting point. They did undertake the required adjustments to account for COVID. The Department of Transportation sets guidelines that we use to determine what those adjustment factors are. And it's basically looking at pre-COVID numbers and then comparing the counts that we do during COVID, during the pandemic, to those pre-COVID numbers to see what adjustments might need to take place. So the applicant did undertake that review. And what was determined is that the traffic volumes along Route 117 are, at least in June of last year, they were off by about 11%. So they were 11% lower than conditions would have been, or pre-COVID conditions. So the applicant did adjust all of their traffic numbers upwards by 11% to reflect that the impact resulting from COVID. And so that was performed in accordance with standard practice, and we did review that, and it does comply with Mass DOT guidelines for those types of adjustments. The other thing relative to COVID is, as the board's aware, a portion of the project site, or all of the site until it's subdivided, includes an office building. So 105,000 square foot office building. And as we know, there's a lot of work from home taking place. So office buildings are not fully occupied. In fact, some of them are not occupied at all. So the applicant did undertake an exercise to fully occupy that building. So that's important. So, independent of what level of occupancy exists within that building at the time that they did their traffic counts, they basically assumed it was vacant and they fully occupied the building and then loaded that traffic onto the roadway network. So, we're very comfortable that between the COVID adjustment and the methodology that they undertook to fully occupy that building, that it's more than accounted for in terms of providing baseline traffic conditions that are representative of what would be there had COVID not occurred. So I mentioned that, and that's always important as we're looking at traffic studies conducted during the pandemic itself. So we're comfortable with the data collection. We're comfortable with all of the adjustments that were made to that data. And we've just asked that the applicant consider adding an additional intersection to the study area. Now, from the context of the project and its impacts, I mentioned the office building earlier. So they're going to, as we saw in the study, they're going to demolish about half of that building. So there'll be about 50,000 square feet of office space left when the project is completed. And then, of course, we have the residential project itself. So as we looked at, or the applicant looked at, the overall net increase in traffic that will result from this project, the net increase over existing conditions with a fully occupied office building The project's expected to contribute somewhere between 50 and 60 additional peak hour trips above and beyond what everyone would experience had COVID not happened and that office building been fully occupied. So the project would add 50 to 60 net new vehicle trips over those conditions over the course of an hour. So during the morning peak hour, which is the highest hour between 7 and 9 in the morning, the project would add somewhere between 50 and 60 net new, and the same thing in the evening. So the highest volume hour in the evening between 4 and 6, that's what the net new trips would look like. And so that's what they're measuring in terms of impacts on the roadway network. So
they
look,
Did they also factor in the school timing when school gets out on that road? Because that's well after, well before the 4 o'clock sort of carve out, and the morning, maybe it's within the time frame when travel is going to the school, but certainly schools I think get out around 2:30, maybe even between 2 and 3:30.
yeah. So when we do the analysis of a residential type of project, obviously there's school related traffic that happens outside of the commuter peak hours. As you might imagine, people in this residential project, they'll be at work. I mean, some of them will be home, some of them will be having kids at the school, but the majority of the residents are out at work. And so the peak activity in terms of traffic volumes, both on the roadway, as well as from the project, are going to occur during those commuter peak hours. There is a spike that occurs during the school peak hour, but as you layered in the traffic from this project during that time period, the adding those two together would be lower than if you added the traffic during the commuter peak hour. And so there is a spike that occurs during the school peak hour, but the absolute peak in terms of the highest volume, both associated with the project and on the roadway, it actually occurs during the evening peak hour. And that's pretty typical of what we find. So it's not to say a project doesn't have impacts during other time periods of the day, but the absolute peak is going to happen during the afternoon peak hour. And so that's why the traditional analysis occurs during the morning and the evening peak. The evening peak tends to be the worst case condition. And so as you're looking at impacts, if the roadway network can accommodate the project's traffic during that evening peak hour, it can accommodate the traffic during the rest of the peak hours of the day. And so that's why they look at those traditional time periods.
Thanks.
So in terms of those impacts, and again, looking at the intersections that the applicant has analyzed, the two signalized intersections with the ramps, they operate with limited delay and vehicle queuing at those locations, with and without the project. So delays were found to be within acceptable ranges. That tends to be delays being less than 35 seconds for any individual movement at the intersections. The vehicle queues were also shown to be relatively minor, somewhere in the order of 5 to 6 vehicles at those locations. As the project added to traffic to those intersections, what was shown in terms of impacts is the delays for any individual movement went up about 3 to 3.5 seconds. So again, what that says to us is that the interchange and the signals have sufficient capacity to accommodate the additional traffic from this project. As we look at the driveway to the project site, and this is probably not uncharacteristic of other unsignalized intersections along the corridor, left turn movements coming out of that driveway during any time period are extremely difficult, just given the volume of traffic on Route 117, but also the speed of traffic. So the combination of those two things makes it difficult to make a left-hand turn. Right turns operate very efficiently. So what was shown in terms of operations on the driveway is that left turn movements operate with extended delay, so could be up to a minute or more during the peak periods. What we're concerned about as we look at that is, again, that's not uncharacteristic of unsignalized driveways or side streets along the corridor. We look at the residual vehicle queue, because what we want to really see is, okay, we acknowledge there will be delays, but we want to make sure that the backups that occur as a result of those delays don't get to a point where, I think most importantly, a fire truck or an ambulance can't turn into the property because they're blocked by queuing that would happen along the driveway. So the residual vehicle queues that are expected range from about 4 to 5 vehicles. And I think, as you saw from the site plan that the applicant had put up, there is more than sufficient queue storage on the driveway to store 4 to 5 vehicles. And then it would not block the ability of an emergency vehicle to be able to enter the site. And also importantly, pedestrians and bicycles would not be impeded by any queuing that takes place either along 117 or within the project site. Those are the important things that we look at. There's also no queuing along 117 associated with left turns entering into the project site. So that's important. So any delays or queuing that is experienced at the driveway, it's completely contained within the property, and that queuing does not inhibit the ability to access the site for emergency vehicles. So that's what we look at. To the extent there's a question about, well, can you install a signal at the driveway? The answer is no. The volume of traffic does not rise to the level that it would meet any necessary criteria to install a traffic signal. So that's not really an option. However, an option is what the applicant is pursuing, which is we have a very wide driveway as you're approaching 117. And so there's more than sufficient room to formalize a separate left or right turn lane. And that's what you see on the applicant's site plans. And that's what we would recommend, and that's what they've shown in the site plan. That allows for the more efficient movement, which is right turns heading to 495, which is the majority of the traffic, to be able to happen independent of the left turn movement. So that's shown in their site plan. And that's something that we would recommend as well as a part of the project. So we do have some series of recommendations that we've have for the applicant to consider. The first of those recommendations, and again, this is going to be independent of their study of the additional intersection, is to, and it'll be a discussion item with the town, as to whether the town would desire to have do not block pavement markings put at the entrance to the project site. So that to the extent that there is vehicle queuing from the intersection to the west, that if it gets back to the point where it might block the driveway, recognizing we have a senior housing community in there, and now we're adding additional residential units, the do not block pavement markings and the accompanying signs would provide the opportunity to keep that intersection clear. It provides enforcement availability to the town police department as well. Absent those markings, you could extend and block that intersection, and there's no ramifications from doing that. Putting the do not block markings and the signs in there does allow for police enforcement to the extent that there is a blockage. So that's a consideration for the town at the location. And it focuses to the chairman's comment or to the board member's comment about blocking of emergency vehicle driveways and such. That's the type of measure you would put in place if those driveways are blocked. And so we've suggested that that might be appropriate here as the number of residents on this road increases. Again, emergency response is important, and that would provide just kind of an added level in enforcement capability for the project site. And then lastly, we have recommended the applicant consider a transportation demand management program. And so that's really a series of measures that the applicant would undertake more or less to inform residents of what available public transportation options are in the area. There is currently not direct service to the project site for public transportation. We do note that the Regional Transit Authority does provide dial-a-ride service to the area. So that would be available to residents that meet the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements for those type of services. However, the applicant is investing money in building a sidewalk, and we do compliment them for doing that. They are installing a sidewalk along the driveway. They're also installing sidewalk along the frontage of the property. So what you're seeing is, kind of bringing to fruition pedestrian amenities in the area, as well as opportunities for bicycling. And so we've suggested that those are things that can be advanced as a part of the project, since they're investing in the infrastructure to do that. This transportation demand management program does provide residents with those type of options, since we know that they're coming and the applicant is embracing those as a part of the project. So we've recommended that they implement those measures. So on balance, what you see in terms of our comments on the traffic study is very well prepared. We've asked that they add an additional intersection to the study area, so that will provide some more feedback to the town and to the board on operations to the west of the project site. We've also suggested that the applicant consider some additional on-site and management-related improvements as a part of the mitigation program for the project. So that's an overview of our review of the traffic study. We also have comments on the site plan. I can stop there to answer questions on the traffic study, or I can go right into my site plan comments because they're very minor. I'll defer to the chair.
I just have one question. There's a grant to the town of Bolton, and this may not have any relevance to this project, to construct a traffic circle in front of Neshoba Regional High School. And I don't know whether that would, as far as stacking or delaying or causing endless traffic streams, would have any impact on this project.
So in theory, it'll provide a benefit, and it'll provide a benefit in a couple of ways. So first of all, there, in theory, again, there shouldn't be backups at a roundabout. There, the idea would be properly designed. The traffic moves, albeit slower, but you tend to have reduced queuing it there. And so it should provide a benefit. The other benefit to it is, as I mentioned, the slowing. Roundabouts not only have, some availability of additional capacity, they're safer because they eliminate conflict points, but they also slow traffic down. So it does provide some opportunity to break up the flow of traffic along 117. So I would more see it as a benefit than something that would be a detriment to the project.
Thank you.
So with regards to the site plan, and I compliment the site engineer. The site plans were very well prepared and very thoughtful with respect to access and circulation. So we have very minor comments on the site plan. The drive aisles within the project site where there's two-way traffic are 24 feet in width, which is more than sufficient for two-way circulation. But I think importantly, as you look at a project like this with a significant amount of parking to meet the needs of the residents, that dimension also provides for adequate parking maneuvers. So we're glad to see that. Where they do have two-way or one-way travel, the parking spaces are angled, which is what we want to see. And the drive aisle behind the parking spaces is 18 feet, which is more than sufficient for angled parking and maintaining one-way traffic flow. There's also a very thoughtful plan for pedestrian circulation throughout the site, where you have sidewalks, you have marked crosswalks within the site. So, those are very good accommodations and things that we would expect. And then that sidewalk continues along the driveway to Route 117 and then along the project's frontage on Route 117. So again, it really embraces pedestrian circulation within the project site and then externally out to 117. And I mentioned that because, I'm not sure if the town will have school bus service that will come into the project site. If to the extent that does not happen and they will be picking up along 117, the sidewalk provides for a safe and separate passage for school children to walk out to 117. And then again, as you look at the access to the property, the driveway is sufficiently wide so that they are able to stripe two travel lanes as you head towards 117, but also would allow for some accommodation for if parents were to park along the edge of the traveled way up towards 117 if the bus is stopping up there. With the weather that we've had, it's nice now, but over the past few days we've got snow and ice. We do know that parents tend to drive their kids to the end of the street to be picked up by the bus if the bus is here or doesn't come into the project site. So that would allow for that to take place. So focusing on our recommendations, what you'll see is we've asked that the applicant provide a churning analysis. They provided a churning analysis for the fire truck, which shows that it is able to access the site, circulate within the site in an unimpeded manner, meaning that it doesn't cross into any parking spaces. We've asked for them to provide a similar analysis for service and loading vehicles. So this would be trash and recycling, and then for moving vans. And then so going along with that is we've asked the applicant to provide a narrative on how trash and recycling will happen or occur within the project site. Where will it happen? Times of day for pickup, and then whether there's going to be rollout containers or such. We want to understand how that will happen. And then for moving vehicles, the site I don't believe has separate moving zones or loading zones. So we want to understand how that will take place, whether parking spaces will be used, and to the extent that parking spaces will be used, how that management activity will take place. So things such as the property manager will be contacted in advance. Scheduling of move-ins, move-outs will be done in advance. Spaces will be coned off, that type of thing, so that we know that the applicant, we're sure they've thought about it, but it's always good to see that on paper so that we can understand and the board can understand that it's been planned in a very thoughtful manner. And then with that turning analysis, we can make sure that the vehicles can get to where they need to within the project site. So we've asked that the applicant undertake that. We also have some recommendations for specific signs and pavement markings within the project site. In particular, one-way and do not enter signs at specific locations where that type of one-way travel will take place. And then along the main drive, so the Bolton Office Park driveway, there are 2 crossings for pedestrians that will take place. One over to the mail center, and then there's one a little bit deeper into the project site that links the buildings. And so we've asked that the applicant provide pedestrian crossing warning signs at those locations, just given the volume of traffic that occurs along that main driveway before it disperses itself within the project. Those are good locations just to let everyone know that there are pedestrian crossings. They do have the ladder or colonial style crosswalk. So that's the bars that you see across the intersection. So that'll provide high visibility, but the signs enhance that because, of course, when you have snow or low light visibility conditions, the signs also denote the fact that there's a crossing at that location. So we've asked that they would do that. And then the last 2 items deal with electric vehicle charging. We've suggested the applicant consider that as a part of the project. Again, it's not a requirement and certainly not something that is necessary from a traffic perspective, but it's just good planning with respect to the project itself. And then pedestrian and then bicycle accommodations. So the bicycle accommodations that we've asked that the applicant consider would be at the clubhouse. So that's where the amenities building are, and that's where we might have children hopefully riding their bikes from the project site over there or walking, but that we provide a bicycle rack at the clubhouse. And then within each of the buildings or at each of the buildings, we've suggested that consideration be given for bicycle accommodations, both external, so bicycle racks, and then internal weather protected bicycle parking. So that concludes our review. You've seen very minor comments relative to the traffic study as well as the site plans. We do think that the site plans are very well prepared from the standpoint of access and circulation. And so I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks for the thorough presentation, Jeffrey. It's good to get that corroboration that, the project, the work that went into the project, at least the design we have presently, at least that you believe it passes muster with state standards and, is well thought out. So that's good.
I think it was a thorough job. I appreciate the mention of the normalization of traffic flow, both due to COVID and due to a fill up of the office park. That's very important to note. My concern throughout this process has been left-hand turn out of this project onto 117. It's still a concern. I'm not sure that's resolved yet. With apologies to the future residents of the property, I'm not really concerned with a 5 or 6 car queue per se, trying to go left out of there. But I am concerned with whether those people in queue get aggravated or impatient and then take risks trying to exit the park going left onto 117, because that is the most difficult aspect of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you even see it currently at the bank, which is just east of that property. If you try to take a left out of the bank when you're leaving it, yeah, you take that risk of taking a right and then going a long way around town or something to get back there. But yeah.
I'm also intrigued by the do not block comments about do not block sections. I'd like to follow up on that at some point too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any sign marking.
Gerard, you're breaking up again.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I keep getting a message that my internet is
I believe
While we're
we
waiting for
lost
him to
him.
come back, this is Janet Bernardo. Unfortunately, I have to drop off to go to another meeting. I just wanted to recognize that for everybody. So I assume I'll see you all again in a month or something.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Jeff, for coming up.
I actually did have a question, going on for what Andy was saying about the left-hand turn onto 117.
If I might interject, I think until the chairman's back and we can ensure that he's here hearing us and that we're getting that. We don't want to have any violation of the open meeting law and have full participation by all the board members.
Hi, this is Amy again.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for that comment. Will you hear me?
I just, I don't really have another meeting, but I'm not sure if you need me anymore this evening. Unless there are other questions relating to wetlands.
Can you hear me, Amy?
I can.
Okay, so this is, I guess I'm back. I've been having some periodic internet instability, it says on my computer, but yeah, no, if you're done, there's no reason for you to stay on. The representative from Horsey Witten or Jeffrey Dirk, if people have had their questions. I guess the only question I would say, if there's any people on the meeting that have questions of the traffic before Jeffrey leaves, to ask them now, so we don't keep people online longer than they need to be.
I did have a question that I was asking before you, or as you got kicked off, Gerard. So I was just wondering if, kind of talking about what Andy was mentioning about taking the left on 117, I do have concerns about that too. I live just down the street really from this project, and taking a left out of my house is a nightmare. So other than the do not block signs, is there anything else that can be implemented to kind of make that left-hand turn easier? I know in one of the prior meetings, there was mention of there can't be a light installed there because there's not enough traffic that would justify a light under the Mass DOT regulation. So I'm just wondering if there's anything else that can be done to kind of try to alleviate that problem.
So that, you know, if we're trying to facilitate left turn movements at an intersection, and it is correct, there are state and federal criteria that have to be met to install a traffic signal. And I think that was what was alluded to, is that the criteria really are based on the volume of traffic. And you have to have a continuous flow of traffic that's at a sufficient level for a solid 8 hours of the day to meet the criteria. And the intersection it will not meet that criteria. So as we start to, as you said, if you can't install a traffic signal, that's kind of what's next on the list. And the next, in terms of traffic control at a location like this, would be the roundabout, because that allows for, essentially the roundabout's purpose is everyone gets the right of way. You get your chance to come out at the intersection and everyone's equal. And that's what it's trying to achieve. So the roundabout, what it would do is it would allow for the left turn movements to be able to come out of there and have equal opportunity with the traffic along 117 properly designed. So that's kind of the next level that you go to. Because the other approach would be always stop control, and the intersection would not meet that criteria either. Just because, as you might imagine, if you install a stop sign on 117, it would just be a nightmare. So I think really what we look at is, let's try to create gaps in traffic to allow for those left turns to come out. The do not block, at least from the standpoint of the queuing extending beyond the driveway, provides that opportunity to be able to get out of the driveway. The other thing I would mention is that there are the sight lines at the driveway. So looking to the left or right, exceed what's required for, you know, the speed of traffic that's approaching the driveway. So someone is going, you know, 45, 50 miles an hour approaching that driveway. Someone coming out of the project can see that vehicle and determine if it's safe to make a left or right hand turn coming out of the driveway. So from the standpoint of the intersection itself, other than cues that block the intersection, it's not it's not that it's unsafe to make the move. It is to the board members and probably to your comment is really, our delay is going to be so excessive that someone is going to take an unacceptable gap or smaller gap than is appropriate to make the left-hand turn coming out of the project site. Right now, the history at that intersection in terms of looking at crashes, even while the office building was fully occupied, doesn't suggest that there's a crash history that people are, taking unacceptable gaps coming out of there. So if we kind of look at the history of the driveway, the way it's operated, there's nothing that would suggest that, other than people will be delayed, that there's a safety condition or an unsafe condition created for left turn movements. So that's kind of that's kind of the way that I'm evaluating it, is that it's not unsafe and there's nothing that suggests that it would be unsafe. It's just that people who live in the project are going to experience delays if they want to make a left-hand turn coming out. But there's not an accident history or crash history that would suggest, even with the fully occupied office building, that people were taking unacceptable gaps coming out of the site.
Yes, but with an office building, you would normally see a different traffic pattern because people are usually going to be heading toward the highway for the most part when they're done at the end of the day.
Right.
And you wouldn't have as many left turn people, I would think, as if you had a residential project.
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
And who makes a determination about whether or not we can
So at some
have do
point,
not block pavement markings? And do we have any of those in town already anywhere?
So 117 is under town jurisdiction, so it's purely up to the road, whoever the road authority is within the town, whether it's DPW or the select board, whoever is the agency or whoever has the right to authorize those. Sometimes it's the select board. Sometimes the select board defers that to town engineer or the DPW.
How close are we from a traffic, for a number standpoint, to be able to put a light there? It seems weird to me that there's a light just, 0.2 of a mile up the street, but not here.
Even with the project, you're not, I don't think you're close to meeting those warrants. It would be extremely difficult to be able to meet it. You probably would meet the peak hour warrant, but that's typically not applied to, this type of a situation. One of the things that is sometimes a consideration, to the extent that there's hesitancy about the left turns, is that, maybe you do ask for the do not block to be put in. And then you could also ask that, at certain levels of occupancy, the applicant monitor that intersection and provide a report back to you. So, to the extent that that's something that would give the board a level of comfort, we would suggest that maybe it's 60% occupancy or 80% occupancy. You ask that they report back to you to say, well, how is it actually operating under real conditions? So, that's something that we could work with the board to develop in a condition, to the extent that that's something that would give you more of a level of comfort about it.
So one
If I
potentially
may.
be a site, like a property management issue, where they'd potentially have someone in the mornings, if it's that bad, sort of directing people out of the property on the left.
So the only a police officer can control traffic within the public right of way. You can't even defer that to a traffic crossing guard. So the police chief would be the determining factor on that. And to the extent that they, and that could be something as a part of the monitoring that's done, because it is always at the discretion of the police chief, but it would have to be a police department or a police official at the direction of the police chief.
So maybe as we move along in the project, we should, solicit that input from the police department on, what they perceive as a viable alternative so we can, try to mitigate any potential problem.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is
Can you hear
Liz Altman. I'm the from TEC, we prepared the traffic impact analysis for the applicant.
Okay.
And I just wanted to respond just very, very briefly that we appreciate Jeffrey's thorough analysis of our report, and he had some minor technical items that we will address in our response to comments. We can meet all of them. We also endorse the do not block the box signage and striping. We think that would help the left turns exiting the site. Also, we are amenable to providing a traffic demand management program, as well as the additional signing and striping on the site plans. We would like to propose a condition of approval to provide the study at 117 and Quadneck Hill Road to identify potential improvement measures, if any, to improve the operation of that signalized intersection. It is a brand new intersection. The site itself is not putting a large amount of traffic through the intersection, but we would be amenable to providing a study to the town for their future use as a condition of approval, if the board would consider something like that.
And Valerie, before at or before our next meeting, could we get some input from DPW and or our select board regarding what it would take to get a do not block pavement marking, and whether or not there's any downside to having that markings put on?
Absolutely. I can forward on the peer review letters to DPW, as well as the select board and public safety officials too, just to see if that might produce any further comments or support of the noted improvements.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments for the traffic or the traffic consultant or the applicant's traffic study? No. So, well, for tonight, that was the we were hoping to cover was the Horsey Witten and the Vanass traffic reviews. So I think we made good headway in getting the details. We certainly, if people hadn't had a full chance to look at those letters, they're very detailed. We'll have some time to look at those now because they just sort of came in recently. But we have some work to do. The applicant has some response work to do. So I think that and we can get some of this new information out to the boards within the town and get additional feedback so that it's we can at some point get on the agenda items review of some of the comments we'll have from our boards on this project. So with that, do we have a calendar, Valerie, you can look at to see sometime in March where we can set up another hearing?
Just a moment, sorry.
Yeah, take time, because I guess we always have to backtrack a little bit in that we need at least give at least a week to 10 days probably to the peer reviewers to receive comment back from either the applicant so that they can then reanalyze them and get a letter out. So probably look at 10, so sometime into early to middle of March.
Mr. Chairman, this is Debbie Horowitz representing the applicant. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Certainly.
Valerie's looking for that. So I think given what you heard tonight from your peer reviewers, that you see there's not that much for us to respond to. And I think if it's possible, we'd like to set a kind of a further progression of the substantive review of the project for the next hearing. So maybe one idea is to make the next hearing really about landscaping and architecture, for instance, with a follow-up of traffic and civil, because I don't think the traffic and civil follow-up is really a full meeting for the next session.
Concur. I can strategize a little bit with maybe Joe Piznolo. We can look at the items, and I know he's helped us in the past. Look at line up some major topics of discussion. I know we do want to look at some of the at some point board commentary on the project as well. Yeah, I wouldn't just have a meeting, just have updates on traffic and on the wetlands reviews. Certainly want to get into other aspects of the project.
Certainly, Mr.
So,
One of the issues that was mentioned in prior minutes or prior to meetings was getting input from the design review board, and whether or not the board would request formally to the design review board to comment. I know other projects, other 40B projects in town have voluntarily, as a matter of courtesy, appeared before the design review board to kind of spur those commentaries. I don't know if that could happen.
That's good. That is a good point, because we did raise it at initial hearing, a question about it. We noted that, yeah, we would need to formally request it to them. I don't know that we've made that formal request, but leveraging off of your comment, I think we should, as a board, formally request that the current information be given to the design review board and ask for their official input.
Yeah, and then the applicant would be free to go, go to one of their meetings or set up a meeting with them, just again as a courtesy. That board has no jurisdiction. It would be just advisory in nature. The other thing that we could put on the agenda, or that we had on the agenda, is just to review input from the other departments, the Board of Health, Conservation Commission, and invite representatives of those boards to the meeting to further discuss. I know there were extensive comments from the conservation agent, and obviously there is board health issues with regards to the waivers that are being sought on both the wells and the wastewater treatment. Seeing that they're both in need of state permits, there's not a lot to talk about there, but certainly with the board should seek and listen to the input from the Board of Health.
Yeah, I'd like to add also some kind of involvement of public safety, police and fire to that list, if that's possible.
Okay. Excellent. Mr. Reed, that was, round that out, police and fire.
is the, if I may ask, is the intent to have representatives attend an evening meeting of the ZBA, or is it precedent in with other 40Bs before this board to receive written comment instead?
Either way, I know that there has been in the past representatives that have come, but written comments are usually fine as well. I mean, you would probably want both, even if they came in person. You'd want them to get it in the record as far as their input.
Right. So we've seen it both ways now. We've had we have some of them started to do some initial documentation. We saw it in I think our packets, or at least in the 580 main, main board information, but we haven't had anyone speak. But to the extent they have any major concerns, certainly have them speak to them over the Zoom would be great to, have their collaboration, because they may have a question that they can have a little dialogue if necessary between the applicants, professionals, and versus letters back and forth, which sometimes just take more time than, the calendar clock catches up with us pretty fast.
Gerard and Joe, I also had some notes written down about how this project may conflict with or correlate with the original 1986 special permit. I'm not sure I understand the whole ramification of it, but is that something that needs to be followed up on?
It's my understanding that the applicant is seeking to request from the select board relief from those conditions of the original special permit for in particular for this the portion of the property that's going to be the 40B. The other issue that we had brought up prior was just the correlation of the modification to the commercial office and how that approval process will happen. And it's my understanding that they're working with the planning board to subdivide the parcel through an approval not required plan, and we'll have to go through some process. And that this is not the applicant that's doing it, but it's the owner that's going to retain the office building. We'll have to go through, which is separate and distinct from this board. But in my initial letter, I suggested that the applicant at least share what they know with regard to that process, and if there's any implications to their design on the 40B design and impact to any waivers that they're seeking with regards to buffering between parking lots and separation between residential uses and commercial uses, things like that. So just I think it's important for your board to understand what's going on with regard to that, because this is not just about developing a vacant piece, but it's taking down a piece of an existing building and reconfiguring a site to open up the development site for this project. So they have to go. I mean, the two approval processes have to somewhat be aligned, even though they're separate applicants, and in this case, separate boards that will govern those processes.
Did you check your calendar that we can put a stake in the sand for another meeting?
Yes, sure. So I think sometime the week of either March 7th or March 14th. The week of March 7th, I actually could only do either Tuesday the 8th or Thursday the 10th. And then the following week, either the 14th, the 15th, or the 17th.
And those are what days? Oh,
those are Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday.
The 15th.
We're already scheduled
have a
on the
meeting.
15th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have that in my calendar.
Yeah, it's Mallard Lane.
No, we just
15th at 6
Thank
o'clock.
you.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not available on the 14th
okay.
or the 16th.
So how about Thursday the 10th?
Works for me.
Works for me.
That likely does not work for me. I could do earlier in the week that week.
Tuesday the 8th? Tuesday the 8th work for folks?
Yeah, I could do Tuesday the 8th.
That works for me.
Works for me.
Works for me too.
Yes.
All right, so why don't we, Tuesday the 8th at 6 p.m. That seems to be a good starting point. And to Ms. Horowitz's comment, as well as others, we'll put together a agenda in advance. We'll coalesce all the items that we think we'll have available. If we have, and we'll give you a heads up where we think we'll have points to discuss, so that it'll be a productive meeting. So do we have a motion to continue to March 8th
at 6 p.m. you said?
6 p.m. Yep, March 8th.
So motioned.
Second.
And those, oh, thank you, sorry. And those in favor, Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes.
and Gabriella Mano.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks, folks, for attending, and it's good information tonight, and we'll look forward to the deep dive for next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, so for the rest of, we can probably still wrap this up by 8. We have on the agenda, we have an administration items. So review and approval of minutes. Valerie distributed 3 sets of minutes. At least that's what earlier today. And then we have one review and approval of annual 2021 annual report. So you want to start with the minutes or the report? We'll bring up the annual report, Valerie, because that may be easy. It's fast. It's smaller.
Sure. Yeah, let me find it.
I apologize for the blockiness tonight on my internet. It's not had that 3 times it went down. I'm like, what the heck's happening?
Hey, Valerie, will you
Yeah.
be able to keep us informed if there's any action on that 1986 special permit before the select board?
Yes, let you know.
Thank you.
So this was good. Thanks for putting in something about Kay in the minutes. I mean, in the report, Valerie.
Of course.
It
Yeah.
was, good to memorialize the work she did for the board. So appreciate it on my point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We got to get Brad to up his, you're expiring this year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
I don't hear any commitment from Brad.
You sure you want me?
We'll strong arm him. Of course we need him. His institutional knowledge is unparalleled for this board. Valerie, were you able to, I don't see it here, but were you going to add something about the Still River?
Yes, yeah, I did not add it in here. I can put it.
Because you have the construction updates. What I thought was interesting, in the rest of the board knew. So on Still River, they're only going to put in 1 house because I guess DEP.
What?
Yeah, after all that, DEP, at least that's right. What you were saying, Valerie. I commented about it in like the construction. Valerie told me that applicant is only putting in a single family house now.
Market rate. Yeah.
After all that.
Yeah, I know.
Which
Yeah,
is essentially what we and the abutters told them for how many years?
Right, but in going to court and this, that, and other thing, and then settling, and so I mean, it'd be good, you know, it was a project, we did it and we had activity even into 21 with it, but just where you had this update on Farm Road where they're, you know, started the development, that maybe we just indicate that, you know, that.
Well, Farm Road is basically, they have 4 buildings there now on what should be 1 lot, and it's really crammed in.
Well, right, but that was what was permitted, but at least on this one, yeah, it was permitted for multiple units, and now it's just going to be 1 single-family home. So somewhere in the record, just to note that.
Yeah, I noticed there was a grader over there doing some work last week when I drove by, but you know.
Right. Oh, when it's going to start seeing multiple like foundations, and you know, now it's not. So that's
yeah, that's good.
Pretty good update. So I mean, if people can decide if you think it's in here or not, if we're comfortable with what Valerie's already prepared here and not have to put any more work on her plate, I'm comfortable if they didn't. But I just thought it'd be nice to put that in there under the construction updates or, you know, section.
Looks good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good to me too.
So status quo as is, don't put anything in there regarding the Still River.
I'm fine either way, to be honest with you. It doesn't impact me either way, I don't think. If we wanted to put it in, I'd be fine with that too.
Okay. So Val, we'll leave it to your discretion to either add it if you think if your workload is so busy because you have other things to do, then just this will be fine.
It won't take a moment, so that's easy to add in.
Okay, all right. So
all right.
So do we need a vote to approve them, or just
That'd be
verbal?
good. Yes.
Okay. So a motion to
I make a
approve
motion
them.
to approve the annual report.
Second.
Perfect.
Carter Hearn,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Gabrielle Lamano.
Yes.
Perfect. So that's out of the way. And then we have a series of 3 minutes to review and approve. I read through them earlier, and I tried to do the case Kitchens detail review, and I didn't notice anything that needed to be changed, but I'll defer to you folks for your reviews as well.
I haven't had a chance to look at them yet, so sorry.
I haven't either, I'm sorry.
Well,
I looked at them and I didn't see anything.
yeah. Mhm.
Would you like me to pull those up?
Sure.
Mhm.
Hey, Gerard.
Yep.
I think I may have brought this up before, but at some point, do we make take some action to get a 5th permanent board member?
So to that point, I think was within the last couple of weeks, we did get a Elizabeth Hutchins through the town's request, sent in a request to Pam Powell, saying, you know, given that she's associate is an opening for full-time, she would volunteer to take the full-time position. And I think, Valerie, you were copied on that, but does that just go to the selectmen, or do we have to act on that? I didn't, because it was from Pam to you. I didn't know if that's, then we just say, fine. And then we would, and we could then look for a second alternative too. I mean, okay.
So, right, so it's on me. I have not followed up. what I need to do is we have other members who or other residents who have recently reached out. I need to clarify with them if they're looking to be an associate or to be a full member. But then once I hear back from them, it could be that they're not interested anymore. We should put that on an upcoming agenda for the ZBA to vote on a recommendation to the select board. And then subsequently, it'll be on a select board agenda.
Okay, so I think process wise, so if we have a current board member who's already an associate who's, you know, also filed for a full-time and, you know, that we give preference to that position versus a new one coming in that hasn't been on the board at all, because, you know, it brings good experience already to the role.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I still do. I will reach out to the others so we could potentially fill an associate member role as well. So that should be on an upcoming agenda.
Perfect. Is that what you want to hear, Andy?
Yes, thank you.
Especially if we don't get a commitment from Brad, we may be having to.
Right, we're still waiting for that commitment.
Yeah.
What is the term? What's the length of the term that I'm refilling?
Forever.
It's called similar to a 40B. It's in perpetuity.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, I'm fine. You can carry me out. You can carry me out feet first.
Yeah. You remember as Jackie Smith said, you know, if you have to do the old check the pulse, and as long as you have a pulse, you're on the board.
There you go.
Until your pulse ceases. That's what she told me. So.
Oh.
God bless Jackie. I'm still here. You know, for better or for worse. So this is which meeting minutes you have up?
What'd you say? Sorry.
What date is here?
This is the 30th, November 30th.
Okay. Yep, the first one. The 30th, the first, the 11th of December of 22, and the 18th.
Yeah. Would you like me to pull those other ones up? Or should we wait on this one?
I'm good with these.
We'll have them ready. I've read through them.
You're cutting off again, Gerard.
Right now, I don't see a message that it's unstable, but can you hear me?
Now I can.
Can now, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was getting a message earlier. I didn't get a message that time, so maybe it's getting ready to do its thing. Is this still the 30th?
No, this is January 11 now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I read them all, but I missed the date there. Yeah, there it is. Mhm.
Do we know, have we heard about whether or not Jim has a engineer? No.
I haven't, no. But we have a meeting scheduled and we told him, you know, it's very productive. So
Right.
if he doesn't, we'll just ask for another continuation for another couple of months, you know. It's not on our plate. So
Right. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
I was okay with these minutes too. I did see these.
Mhm. Okay. So the people caught up on this set of notes. So
Yes.
want to bring up the last set, Valerie,
Sure.
and then we'll.
Yeah, I'm good with these as well.
Thanks.
Yep.
Do we need motions for each individual set or just one motion for all of them?
We could do one motion for all three.
Okay. I guess
Has
I
Andy-
can.
Has Andy opined on this set yet?
Yeah, I'm fine with them. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Andy. Okay, now you can.
I would motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
And those in favor, Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
and Gerard Ahern.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm. And so that concludes what we had on our agenda. We just need a motion to adjourn and we'll be done by 8 o'clock again. We're on a good roll.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Aye.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
and Gerard Ahern.
Yes.
All right.
If you ask
All
Gabrielle,
right, Gerard, you're gonna get your internet fixed for next meeting.
yeah, I don't know. It's the first time ever, so I don't know.
Do you have
what
squirrels chewing on the cable or something?
I'm gonna go find out.
Yeah. Are you on a Bolton access? All right. Well.